Hello everybody, welcome back to the SUV Properties Podcast. My name is Caden Stanley and I'm joined here by my broker Melanie Eden, and today we're here to talk about the application process. But real quick, as you know, before we get into that, if you guys like what you're seeing, please go to our website, like, comment what you guys would like to see. If you guys love what you're seeing here, go yet again to our website, suvproperties.com, share with others, spread the knowledge that we're hopefully being able to spread to you week in and week out again. Back to the topic of the application process. What we require for our application process that we do in paper here at SUV Properties is the application itself, a $20 application fee, We Energy's bill, credit report, and then we also want a photocopy of their ID so that we can identify who they are. Now let's talk a little bit more about why we do all that things. Let's start with the application itself. What can somebody expect to fill out on our actual paper application?
We're going to put an application on this podcast for you, front and back, so you can see what the application looks like, as well as the requirements, because you missed a very important part of the requirements.
Uh-oh.
Proof of income.
This is true. I did. The latest 2 pay stubs at least, sometimes even more.
At least, or if you're on SSI, Social Security of some point, whatever money you receive, child support, make sure you bring it in. We require the paper application because there are so many nuances that many tenants, particularly in Milwaukee, don't necessarily know how to get us the information, even if they're bringing in a paper application. They don't know what we're talking about. So having it done electronically, we just have them bring it in so that we can get and have a hard copy of everything that we can keep in their file if they're approved. So some of the things that are on their application, their full name, any aliases they may have. If a woman's been married or she uses multiple last names for a variety of reasons, we can explain why when we're processing the application, why we need to know any names you might be known as. We are also going to require their social security number, their phone number, their email address, their current employer, their prior employer, current landlord, prior landlord. Sometimes we require make and model of car, because if they have a car payment, we're going to have to subtract their car payment out from their income, because we require 40% of, if someone makes $3,000 a month, 40% of their income is what qualifies for the rent, but that's a net. But if we find out that they have a car payment that takes up $600 of their income, they're not going to be able to afford to pay the rent. So we want to know what some of their other outstanding costs are for the month, which is why we require the credit report, because that stuff will all come up in the credit report. What is our credit report number? What do we need to have?
Yeah, so here at SUV Properties, we require a 600 credit score for a variety of reasons, as she's saying. Obviously, one thing to see what's all out there, and if, most importantly, if they're paying it on time, right? It's okay if you've got other things out there, but how are you paying it on time? Are there late fees, things like that? And what do you all have out there? What are the balances? How long are these terms for? Things like that.
The nifty thing about the credit report is it provides us with the spellings of your names, because you might find this hard to believe, but not everybody completes the maiden or additional alias name sections. They just skip right over that. But on the credit report, it'll list their names. It'll list all the addresses that these names have been under. So many times on the rental application, we will see that they'll list an address, and they won't fill in the landlord information on there, but the address that's on the rental application, what does it not match?
So it might not match a couple of different things. First of all, the driver's license, the We Energy's bill, or the credit report, they might all be different, right? It might be a mix, and why is that?
Well, people use a variety of mailing addresses. Usually the typical answers we get, I send all my important mail to my mama's address. Okay, but that doesn't match your driver's license. Then we also look on the driver's license to see when that driver's license was issued. Because a lot of times they'll have a new issue driver's license, so they paid the money to have a new driver's license issued, but it doesn't match mama's address, and it doesn't match their current address, and it doesn't match a prior address. So part of the reason we're looking for consistency in the application, from the credit report, from the mailing address, to the driver's license, to see if they really have lived in the place as long as they say they're living there. Because if they move around a lot, well, they're going to move around a lot on you, and do you want somebody who is not upholding the terms of the lease, and moving on a regular basis. So the driver's license, their pay stub, their credit report, the rental application, we're checking all of those addresses. Now, if 3 of the addresses are the same and the mailing address is mama's address, okay, they've got one address and we'll continue to process it. But if nothing is matching up, it begins to throw up a lot of red flags. And the more red flags that pop up on an application, because our application provides to us, usually someone puts their what foot forward when they're giving us their application.
The right foot forward. I don't know what
They put their best foot forward because they want to rent this property from you.
Yeah.
So they are giving you the golden, glorious picture of what a wonderful tenant they're going to be. It's our job to go through the application to find the dirty underbelly of what's really going on in this person's life. Because we get one shot. Because once we hand out keys, what do we got?
We've got a tenant now to deal with. They're in.
They're in. And if the person on the application is not the person who is signing the lease, or surprisingly enough, what happens when someone walks out with those keys? When someone walks out with the keys, we don't know who they're giving those keys to. It could be somebody that is in the backseat of the car and they're a straw renter for this applicant. So we want to take a look at not only who is on the application, but who they've lived with in the past. Because when you're doing what's called CCAP, do you want to explain CCAP?
Sure. CCAP, at least here in Wisconsin, is the service that we're actually lucky enough to be able to use to look at criminal background. So we're looking obviously for evictions and other criminal records as well. So it's kind of more of like a public records search here, so you can look into somebody, which is another key portion why we're looking to see where their names are under, because often they will have one story or history under one name, and then, like you said, your best foot forward kind of history on another name.
Right, and how oftentimes if they have a poor background, how do they get a better foot forward?
Sure, I mean, there's many reasons, right? Maybe they're adding a letter, or there's a different letter in the middle name, or if they're changed that last name, all of a sudden now you have difference. So there's many ways you can just, maybe tweak or, spell your name a little bit different if there's a silent E at the end, to all of a sudden now, oh, I've got nothing on my record.
Right, exactly. So most of the time a tenant will probably CCAP themselves under various spellings of their name before they turn in their application. So we're matching up their ID and their social security card along with the application they're bringing in, seeing if there's any other aliases that are out there with their credit report, so that we can figure out, is this the person who they say they are?
Yeah, who we want to rent to, yeah.
And when we're calling their employer or we're calling their prior landlord, we're getting the straight scoop on who they are. The other thing that's important in the application is if they're renting from a relative, how do we feel about if someone who's renting from their grandma or their mama or their sister or their auntie, how do we handle that situation?
Yeah, that's a great question, because it's very hard, right? Because first of all, many times they're paying very little or no rent at all, right? So it's very hard to establish a rental history. But for us, in terms of property managers and real estate, owners just like yourself, it's very hard to kind of handle and take that situation, because then you also call them, well, of course their mother or grandma is going to give them a great reference, right?
So they are wonderful. They pay all their bills on time, and we really want them out. We can't stand living with them any longer. Usually they're moving out for a variety of reasons. So taking a relative as a landlord, I discount that. I go right to their former landlord if they have one. If they don't have one, it's automatically a double security deposit, because I consider renting from a relative as having no rental history at all. And if they don't have any trouble with a double security deposit, they understand the situation, you probably have a very good tenant on your hands. If they start giving a lot of pushback, there's a reason we're choosing a double security deposit. You probably don't want them, because so the security deposit, we normally charge 1.5%. So your security deposit's $1,800 if you're renting a $1,200 place. Well, now the security deposit is $2,300. It's not that much more, but that extra $400 is going to push them over the edge. And if it does push them over the edge, it's not the worst thing in the world, because they'll go on to rent from somebody else, and maybe you just dodged a bullet.
It could be a very large bullet, as we talked about in some of these stories before in the previous podcast.
Right. So understanding who is renting from you. I have a couple stories. Do we want to do it? We haven't done stories in a while.
It's been a while.
Yeah. So it's funny when someone fills out an application, because I will take a look at how they spell their name on the top line of the application and how they sign their name on the bottom of the application. Then I try to match up that signature to the driver's license. It's not uncommon to have different signatures between the application, like wildly different signatures. It usually means that's not the person who completed your application. Someone completed it on their behalf. And I can't tell you how many times we've caught somebody, oh, I always misspell my name. And I'm like, that is so weird.
How many times have you misspelled your name?
0.
Yeah, weird.
Right.
Same here.
Same. Like Michelle will have an extra L in it, or it has an extra E at the end. It'll have 2 E's. Or Johnson will be S-E-N rather than S-O-N. And you can really hide in the dirty underbelly of the tenant community if you have a very common last name. Wilson, Olson, Johnson, Jones, because when you CCAP those last names, you're going to have pages and pages of information on those people. So you got to be able to weed through the addresses and click on each one of those links, populate the person's birthday in there so that you're actually getting down to the person that it is. And that's why we also ask for their middle name, so we get the middle initial. We had one where they had multiple middle initials on the application, and on their driver's license they also had multiple middle initials. But what weren't they?
They were not the ones that were on.
They were not the same middle initials between the 2 individuals. So it makes me very suspect. So our job as property managers and application processors is to really figure out what is the truth in this application, because once they're in your building, they can cause a lot of damage if you are not renting to the person that you think you're renting to. And even when you are renting to the person that you think you are renting to, once they walk out the door with those keys, we have no idea who's in the car and who they're tossing the keys to in the back seat. We had a situation where we had rented to a couple, and they had rented from us for like 7 or 8 years, and they were immaculate. And they paid their rent mostly on time. We had to stalk them. But then we got down to the point where they were never paying their rent in time, and we actually needed to evict them. Well, we found out not only did they move out, they bought a house, and they had one of their kids move into the property who had been living there for a couple of years. The parents were acting as the straw renters. They were charging their kids like $1,200 in rent. They were paying us the $1,100 in rent. And the place was an absolute blow-up disaster because they had dogs in cages and there was dog crap everywhere in the place, and it was awful. And then we went through the eviction process, and they claimed that, well, so-and-so was dying of cancer, yet when the sheriff is there, they pull up in a nice car that's on the repo list because they weren't paying their bills at home. And, oh, by the way, guess what's happening to their current house?
Let me take a guess. They're probably not paying their mortgage, so
that one's in foreclosure as well. So understanding the application process and who you're renting to, don't be quick.
Yeah, very important. Huge.
Don't get aggressive and say, I have to fill this place, because it can cost you more money to fill it with the wrong person than to fill it with the right person. It may cost you a lot of money to fill it with the right person, but if you can have kind of the right person there for a long time,
longevity, yeah,
that is paying you a large portion of your rent. I hate to say that property management, rental properties, you're working within the law of numbers, and you're trying to get a long stay time and hoping someone's going to be there 5 to 7 years before you actually get your place back and you need to do a remodel on it, because the number of good tenants, I know this is going to sound terrible depending on the location, there's a lot more bad tenants than there are good tenants. If you can find the 75%ers, you'll probably make money in real estate, because it's too hard to find the top 25. And the bottom 60 are easy to find, but they're not easy to clean up after.
That's true. And the easiest way to remember all this stuff is to just hire a property manager like us.
Fantastic.
We take care of it for you. We go through all the applications for you, fill your place. It's that simple.
So all we do is collect money, right?
Of course.
Right, and then deal with all the drama on the backside. But that is another podcast. Thank you for watching our podcast today. We appreciate you taking the time. We are real estate professionals looking to spread the joy of real estate around the world. We can do it with your help. Go to our website, suvproperties.com. Press like, email us, do whatever it takes. Send it to your friends. We can't help them if you don't help them. Thanks for joining us.